It was a cold morning in the heart of downtown Chicago, where the glass towers of wealth touched the sky and the streets below were filled with people chasing dreams, or running from their pasts. Among them walked Maya Carter, her coat too thin for the biting wind, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn-out folder that held the last piece of her hope. Her shoes were scuffed, her eyes tired, yet there was something in her gaze, a quiet strength, a spark that refused to die even after life had taken almost everything from her. She stood before the tall mirrored building of Evercrest Corporation, a company known for its ruthless efficiency and an even more ruthless CEO, Alexander Reed. For weeks, Maya had been trying to get a small investment to relaunch her late father's community cafe, a place that once gave free meals to struggling families, including many who worked in the shadows of that same city. But every door had closed in her face. No one wanted to help her, nobody with no capital. Still, she had one last appointment, with the man people called the king of cold-hearted deals. If you believe kindness and second chances still matter in this world, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps keep stories like this alive. When Maya entered the luxurious boardroom of Evercrest, she instantly felt out of place. The marble floor reflected her shaky steps, and the soft hum of air conditioning made her shiver even more. Sitting at the head of the long table was Alexander Reed, a man in his mid-30s, impeccably dressed, his expression unreadable. He looked up from his laptop briefly, just long enough to assess her appearance, the simple clothes, the cheap bag, the nervous hands, and then returned to his screen. "So, Miss Carter," he said without looking up, "you're here to pitch an investment. What exactly do you have to offer?" Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. She explained her idea. How her father's cafe wasn't just a business but a community space that helped people in need. How she wanted to rebuild it, modernize it, make it self-sustaining. She spoke of how the cafe had been a safe haven for single mothers, homeless youth, and struggling veterans. But as her words flowed, Alexander leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk curling his lips. When she finished, he simply asked, "And how much personal capital do you plan to invest?" Her throat tightened. I don't have any money right now. Everything I had went into caring for my father before he passed." For a brief second, silence filled the room. Then came the sound she dreaded most, laughter. Cold, cutting laughter. "You're telling me," he said, shaking his head, "that you walked into one of the biggest corporations in the city to ask for millions, when you have nothing? That's adorable." Her eyes stung, but she forced herself not to cry. "I'm not asking for charity, Mr. Reed. I'm asking for a chance." He looked at her again, this time with faint amusement. "The world doesn't give chances to people who can't back their dreams with money, Miss Carter. Come back when you learn that." She left the office humiliated, her heart heavy with disappointment. Outside, the rain had started to fall, blurring the city lights into a hazy dreamscape. She stood by the crosswalk, her reflection flickering in the puddles. Maybe this was the end. But destiny has strange ways of revealing itself. That evening, Alexander attended a charity gala hosted by one of Evercrest's biggest partners, the Carter Foundation, a global organization known for funding education and community initiatives. As he entered the ballroom, filled with powerful figures and elegant decor, he noticed the portrait displayed near the entrance, a smiling man beside a young girl holding a trophy. The plaque read, "In memory of Richard Carter, founder of the Carter Foundation." Alexander froze. Carter. The name echoed in his mind. Could it be? He found himself asking one of the coordinators about the portrait. "That's Richard Carter," the man said proudly. "He was one of the most generous philanthropists in the country. The foundation is now being revived by his only daughter, Maya Carter. She's been quietly working to rebuild it after her father's passing." The words hit Alexander like a thunderclap. Maya Carter, the same woman he had laughed at earlier that morning. His chest tightened as realization dawned. He had mocked the daughter of the very man whose foundation had helped thousands, including perhaps even some of his own employees. He quickly asked if Maya was at the event. She was, serving drinks at one of the tables, volunteering rather than attending as a guest. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back, her expression calm but distant. As Alexander watched her from across the room, something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, he saw beyond the surface, beyond the status, the wealth, the hierarchy. He saw her humanity. Later that night, he approached her. She looked surprised, even guarded, but before she could speak, he said softly, "Miss Carter. I owe you an apology." Her eyes met his, cool and unreadable. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Reed. You made your position clear." He hesitated, struggling with his pride. "I didn't know who you were." She gave a faint, sad smile. "Would it have mattered? Would you have treated me differently if you knew my father's name?" Her words cut deeper than any accusation. He had no answer. That night, as Alexander returned home to his penthouse, he couldn't shake the image of her standing there, graceful even in humility. He looked around at his empire of glass and steel and wondered when he had lost touch with what truly mattered. Over the next few days, he quietly began researching her father's foundation. What he found stunned him. Old records, news clippings, and interviews about how Richard Carter had once saved hundreds of small businesses during a recession, even donating to struggling students with no expectation of return. He learned how the Carter Foundation had nearly collapsed after Richard's death, and how Maya had been fighting alone to rebuild it, refusing to sell her father's principles for profit. Alexander couldn't sleep that night. For the first time, he saw his own reflection and didn't like what he saw. The empire he'd built was powerful, but hollow. He realized that success without compassion was just another kind of failure. 2 weeks later, Maya received a letter from Evercrest Corporation. She almost threw it away, assuming it was another rejection. But when she opened it, she froze. Inside was a personal letter from Alexander Reed himself. He wrote, "I was wrong about you, Maya. About everything. I judged you by what you didn't have, instead of what you stood for. I've spent years believing money defined worth, but you've reminded me that character does. If you'll allow it, I'd like Evercrest to fund your cafe, not as a business deal, but as a partnership in purpose." Tears filled her eyes. She had faced ridicule, loneliness, and loss, but this time, life was giving her a glimmer of light. Still, she hesitated. Could she really trust him? When they met again, Alexander didn't come in a suit or with assistants. He came in casual clothes, no pretense, no arrogance. He visited the old cafe site with her, a cracked building covered in dust and faded paint. She told him stories about the people her father had helped there, the single mother who became a nurse, the homeless teen who now owned a small bakery, the veteran who found peace in serving coffee to others. As she spoke, Alexander quietly listened, his heart heavy with humility. He rolled up his sleeves and began helping her clean the place. That day, something changed, not just between them, but within him. Months passed, and the cafe reopened under a new name, Hope Grounds. It wasn't just a cafe, it was a community reborn. People from all walks of life came there, not just to eat, but to connect, to heal, to belong. Alexander attended the opening, but not as a CEO giving a speech, just as a man learning what it meant to care again. The media soon picked up the story of the unlikely partnership between the cold-hearted CEO and the humble philanthropist's daughter. When reporters asked Maya how she found the strength to forgive him, she smiled and said, "Because my father always taught me, sometimes, people need grace more than they need judgment. The ones who've lost their way are often the ones who need kindness the most." Alexander, standing beside her, said nothing. But in his eyes, the arrogance was gone, replaced by something real, respect. In time, Evercrest began funding more community programs, redirecting a portion of its profits to rebuild local centers, shelters, and small businesses. Employees said Alexander had become a different man, warmer, more human. He no longer laughed at people's struggles. Instead, he listened, learned, and led with compassion. And Maya? She continued her father's legacy, quietly changing lives, one heart at a time. But deep down, she knew something else had changed too. She had taught not just a powerful CEO a lesson, but perhaps the world itself, that kindness is never weakness, and that those who seem to have nothing can hold the greatest power of all, the power to change hearts. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating stories that remind the world what compassion truly means. Speech balloon special request, comment below. Everyone deserves a second chance, if you believe in redemption, kindness, and the power of humanity. As the cafe lights glowed late into the night, laughter and warmth filled the air. Alexander looked across the room at Maya, who was serving coffee to a young boy with worn-out shoes. Their eyes met for a brief second, and they both smiled, a silent acknowledgement that life had a strange, beautiful way of bringing people together. For once, Alexander Reed wasn't the man with the most power in the room, he was simply a man grateful to have found the kind of wealth money could never buy. And in that simple truth, the world felt just a little more human.